Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me here today. My name is Timo. Yeah, as it was mentioned, I'm part of Mama Sig Lab, and actually, pretty much a year ago today, we started a city. So, first day of work, we got to pick up our computers. We got our login details. So this was the first page we were on. Username, password. Now down here, you see a little checkbox. What do you guys think that checkbox does? Any ideas? What would you expect it to do? Exactly. Yeah. So my guess was that too. Once was more thinking about terms of service. In reality, it was change your password. Um, so yeah, just to let you know, kind of where we're at. So just to give it a little background about the city, Malmö Stad is a huge organization. I mean, we have about 350,000 people here in Malmö. 32,000 of them work for the city of Malmö. So basically every 10th person in the city works for the city as well. And so basically it's a big organization that is split in 13 different departments doing anything from elderly care, school, city planning, street planning, cultural department. So it's like basically 20 different companies in one. And we are part of one central unit called Stadskontoret, which is kind of there to help out all the other organizations within. Um, um, so just to give you a little background about me and Mons. So yeah, as we mentioned, I'm a software engineer and then was product uh, manager. Worked for multiple startups. Most recently, Castle Intelligence, which is like a user security company. Mons also has a lot of experience founding his own startup, and then later on being the tech director at us2, working with companies like Barclays and Google, building Google Cardboard. Um, so we all have a strong digital product background. Yeah, and now again, this is where we're at today. Malmö Stad, a little bit of a different look. Um, yeah, you can. So yeah, we are Malmö Civic Lab. Basically, the idea was uh, coming from the mayor, Katrin, wanting to get people that work in the startup space into the city and basically experiment what's going to happen. So we initially were in there for 1 year, which is now running out. And we've been given the task to build 3 prototypes. So very vague and very open. So really early on, uh, when we came in, we found out that, if you can go to, that it's not really a technical issue, right? It's more of a design issue. So we have a lot, like the cities, of course, there's a lot of analog stuff still going on, but mainly it is a digital city. Like people are using digital tools, they're using a lot of digital products within the city, but they're not really properly designed for the task at hand. And then the next thing we're seeing, I think, there's a lot of digitalization going on for the digitalization's sake. And I think in my world, there's 2 gains from digitalization. Either we make what we already have more efficient, or we can provide better services for the same kind of price point. Uh, and then the third part was we realized it's really, really hard to maintain a flow within a city of that scale or within an organization of that scale. And what I mean by that is kind of, for me, flow is more like how can we get into a state of continuously making progress? And I'm not talking hypothetical progress, but actual progress, seeing that we're moving forward, continuously getting better at what we provide. And I think I found this slide here, and I liked it quite a bit because I think it's a very psychological thing to stay in a state of flow. And I think in this axis you see kind of the 2 different worlds. So yeah, on the left side you see the task on the y-axis you see the task difficulty and the user capability, right? So if the task is super difficult, if you can go to it. So like an example here would be if you're tasked to fix global warming, I think there's a lot of anxiety in there. You're overwhelmed and you don't know where to start. And then on the other spectrum of the things, it might be things like copying data from one system over to another one over and over again, which is not really creative, really boring. So I think we need to move into a state of flow where we kind of the sweet spot of task difficulty and capability of us to move forward. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about three stories from the inside, things that we've done inside the city, and what we think helped us maintain flow. So one of the first things when we were thrown in is basically that we were kind of like an agency, so we needed to find clients within the organization itself. And we stumbled over this uh, problem where the HR department, they are doing like employee surveys. Right now, they have a little paper document. The manager goes in, prints out a paper document, distributes it to all the employees. They have a little dartboard because they choose to visualize it as a dartboard where they basically plot in how happy they are with different questions. Um, and they were looking for digitalizing that. And I think for us, as I mentioned before, like our goal is to get to progress as fast as possible. So they were in the process of talking to an external company to build a tool that visualizes their dartboard in a digital way. And while we were in the meeting with the client, I kind of zoned out because my Swedish skills are not that great. And I just used Google Forms and built a survey with that and then visualized it in spreadsheets. So I think we had basically within the meeting where we discussed if we should build something, we built a little prototype in the first place. So yeah, they liked that, so we continued doing it. We ended up using something called Typeform, and unfortunately, the HR department was so in love with their dartboard visualization that we couldn't get around it. So we built a little custom thing of visualizing it as a dartboard, so everybody's happy. Uh, but at least we didn't reinvent the wheel, and we could leverage what we already have, right? And I think that is a lot of times this idea where we think like, oh, if I get a new digital camera, then I will start taking pictures. You're always waiting for the tool, but in reality, there's a lot of things already there that you can use to make the progress faster. Um, one of the second uh, things we were doing is error reporting. And I think you might have seen, basically error reporting within the city might be you being out in the street and seeing potholes, or it might be graffiti on the wall, lamps not working, all those kind of things. And I think this was the first project where we took the city through the proper user design kind of flow. So doing user interviews with both the power users of this tool and then also within the organization to figure out kind of what the needs are, how the system could look like, and also so it was to show how a service design process will look like, and also that the city can do something that is nice and is built for the citizens. So if you look at this, this is the original solution. Sorry, that the Malmö Stad had. You see a lot of text. You get into the e-service. You try to find your location. You forget to click to save your location. Then you start from scratch again. Find your location. And then we start all this kind of different questions. So we ask you to categorize what type of error that is. You have to describe the error. When did you see it? And then we ask a lot of questions about who you are and what you do. And so it's a bit weird. And then also, so when we went through the design process, we learned like quickly that a lot of users have an issue with the classification, because the classification might be something like, is it in a park? Is it on a playground? Or is something broken? Well, if you're in a park and a playground and something is broken, you have three categories to choose from. So basically the categories are way more for our internal usage, because we need to figure out who we're going to forward the task to. And we talked to the people that are working internally. They said basically citizens are always miscategorizing it, and they were annoyed by that. But I think it was an unfair judgment because, yeah, as I said, it's hard to do that. So we stripped that away. We stripped away all the statistics because we gathered all that information and nobody ever looked at it. And we came up with this little service. So it's a very clear call to action. Send in a picture. And then, yeah, most of the people are actually reporting it while they're out in the streets. So current location is probably where you want to have it. And you provide your contact information to follow along. So yeah, that was it. That is the whole process now. So it's way simpler, and it's super easy to do. But I think one important thing with this project and why we choose to work on this one is that it had little outside dependencies. And I think that is something that we notice as well, is when we're starting something in the city, it's always crucial to do something where you have not 100 stakeholders at the same time, because that wears you down. You don't make any progress. You keep on running around figuring out who is the right people, who do I need to talk to. So choose something to start off with that has very little dependencies, so you can actually make progress fast. And then the last project that I want to talk about was homelessness in the city of Malmö and a matching algorithm. So we got approached by the head of digitalization for the social department, and he had this idea that we can basically build an algorithm to match homeless people with housing. So the city every week gets new housing from different housing companies that are offered to the city as social housing, and then we take this housing in, and we figure out who of the people that are in need of housing would be the perfect fit for that, basically. But here you see we are starting with a solution. So we said the same as we did with the error reporting project. Is like, okay, let's take one step back. Let's first figure out what's going on in here, and then we can decide possible solutions. So we embedded ourselves in the social department, and we spent the first 3 weeks basically, puzzling together the pieces. What is happening from the first day somebody knocks at our door and says, I don't have any housing, I'm in need of housing, until they're back outside of the social service again, and they're in their own permanent housing. So we had to interview a lot of different social workers that are sitting in all different parts of the city and working with the people. And we mapped out over a couple of weeks the whole process from, basically, day one to, and then in here you see all the actions that are happening in-house. So when we looked at that and talked to them, we figured out that the matching actually works really well. They do about once a week, they have this matching meeting. They had about 15 to 20 people, and they have clear criteria of how they match those people to the housing. It takes them about 2 hours to do that. Everybody was fairly happy with that process. So we figured probably no need to build an algorithm to do anything there, because the humans are really good at doing that. But what happened during that time was that we found out that right after the matching, once we found a place where people can stay, it takes us an average 68 days until they actually move in. And that, of course, is a lot of stress on the people to be staying in this temporary housing, because it's not the nicest living environment to stay in. It's very stressful. So any day we can get them to move in earlier, it's a huge, huge gain, both for the people, but also economically. So if you think about the homelessness process, the whole system is a very, very complicated system, right? And it's hard, and we're ending back up in the anxiety space. You don't know how to fix it. You don't know what you can do. But then if you take a little chunk of it, it suddenly becomes very simple. So in those 6 to 8 days, the first 10 days we spend, it's basically us taking the information of the person that we would like to move into the housing. We write it up, we put it in an envelope, we post it to the housing company. The housing company then has 10 days to reply to us and let us know if the person is allowed to move in or not. So we figured, like, okay, what can we do to lower the time frame? So the first step we did was, since one of the biggest housing companies, MKB, it's owned actually by Malmö Stad, and we get about 60% of the apartments from them. So our thinking was, well, if we can improve it with anyone, it's probably with them. If it doesn't work with them, it won't work with any of the other house companies that we're working with. And they are sitting in Malmö, and our social departments are all in town Malmö. So our first attempt on this was that instead of sending it via post, Måns and me jumped on a bike, picked up those papers, and dropped them off at MKB. So tiny little intervention, no digital tool at all. But in that day, we had 11 of those papers. In average, every day for every person cost the city 1,000 kronas. So just by shortening it a little bit, we were basically able to save the city 110,000 kronas with an hour of biking. And now we've continued doing that, and we talk more and change the process with the housing company MKB. So now when we talk to them, for them, the problem was, of course, they have a lot of other things to do. And they are getting those letters from us maybe sometimes Mondays, some others come in Wednesdays, some others come in Thursdays. So they do it whenever they have kind of time for it. So now we negotiated with them and came up with the solution that every Thursday, so Wednesday we do this matching. Thursday morning, once collect all those papers, we bring them over to MKB. They know between 1 and 3 they have a time slot open where they're going to process all the papers. So now they know, okay, everything is going to be bundled. If we do it during those 2 hours, we're basically done for the week. So now with MKB, and we're currently running this trial, we're about 8 weeks in. We're basically shortening it from 10 days down to 1 day. Yeah. So of course, there's only so much we can do, right? And like my dream for the city and to get more into a state of flow and being able to have this real progress happening is one. I think we need, as an organization, we need to have clear, measurable goals. I think that's something we are lacking a lot in the city. There's a lot of ideas of what we should do, but then it's always too vague. So like you don't know if you're actually making progress. And I think if you don't know if you're making progress, it's also really, really hard for you to stay in a state of flow and being, having the sense of, okay, we're moving forward. We're actually making progress. Yeah. And the second part is, I think, we need to be able to get more focus. I think this is a big issue. And I think that aligns also very well with measurable goals. Because right now, if you don't know what goals you are working for and what is your main task, there's also really, really hard for you to say yes or no to anything that comes along your way. So you constantly get distracted, and you might end up, instead of working on one project, you end up working on 15 projects at the same time. Everything takes more and more time, etc. And then lastly, I think we need more doers, not talkers. We are working with a lot of strategists in the city, and everybody has good ideas and has ideas about hypothetical change. But nobody is really trying to move forward and make things happen. So I want to get this out. And as Mon said, we're looking for people. We need more people like you coming in the city and actually be able to drive this forward. Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
As you said in the beginning, that there seems to be sort of a trend towards a lot of digitalizing things just for the sake of having it digitalized. I was wondering, with the last sort of project you presented, because right now there is no digital solution, it's just make the process that's already there a lot more focused and a lot more efficient. Right. Is there still sort of an end goal there to ultimately find a way to digitalize that, or? Absolutely,
absolutely. So like one part I left out of the story was that we wanted to try this out really fast. We said, like, why don't we use email? Then we got our lawyers involved from the city, or they got involved, let's put it that way. And they were like, no, we cannot use email. It's not secure enough, etc. So we figured until we find a digital solution properly, and I think we want to do something that we can do now without having to buy a new solution or sorting that out. So I think, and the big time improvement, I mean, in the end, what we want to get down, what is getting the average down, right? And the huge improvement we can make already there. And of course, then we can add another gain by a digital tool. But at the same time, if you think about the numbers, if we have to do this bike ride once a week, and then it takes us about an hour to do that, that costs us maybe, let's say, if we hire a bike courier, that might cost us 1,000 kroner or something. So depending on what digital solution we might find, we can basically bike for another 20 years before it pays off to pay for that solution. So I think it's always this kind of a thing. And I think that's something we are not seeing so much in the city, this kind of thinking about the cost of a digital solution, and the problem I showed you before with the error handling. We build that, but more as showing to the city that we can do something like that. I don't think personally it's a good idea for Malmö Stad to build any custom software. We are too small of an organization. It doesn't, we don't basically reap the benefits of technology that does scale to infinity. So I think this makes only sense if we then maybe collaborate. So with this Fehlermellan error reporting that we build, we're going to open source that. Today, we're going to meet with Helsingborg. We're going to try to get them on board. We try to spread that. And then I think in that sense, it makes sense to use digital tools if you can get other cities on board. Because that's a beautiful thing within the city, right? We're not competing with any other cities. We're not, we can share, we can be in the open. And why not share also what we build in our learnings with other cities?
great work that you guys are doing. I was just wondering that right now it's, I guess, 2 of you or maybe a few more. Are you currently just working on solutioning, or are you trying to actually facilitate the organization to be able to do this on their own? Because I imagine to scale it to the level of even Malmo Stad, just a few people will never get there.
Yeah. So I think, yes, we are facilitating that, but I think we are really trying to facilitate it in a hands-on way. So when you look at the homelessness project there, I think it's so much more powerful to embed yourself in them and show on somebody's own problems that it is possible to do it in a different way. Because if we do upfront lectures, there's always this, well, it won't work for us. So I think we're trying to do that in there. So what happened there now in the social department is, one, now they are in the process of hiring a data scientist to be more analytical and trying to get more KPIs in. They used us as a case to now send 25, 30 people of their department into service design training. So they are getting the skills in-house. Because I think in the end, I don't think we should exist as an organization, like Malmö Civic Lab. Our goal is to be obsolete in 5 years, because I think there's only so much we can do from the outside, and it is in a continuous process, right? You cannot stop. It's not something you do for 3 months and then you're done. You keep on having to work like that. So our goal is to get the entire city to work like that, and for us to be obsolete. Good. Oh, sorry.
I'm a late developer. How did you actually get involved with the city to start with, as in sort of win that contract, or win the contract, get the support from the city in order to do that sort of role? Because it's quite an integral part of what they're about, right, and their kind of PR and...
How we got into the city, you mean? It was a regular, they had a job ad out, and we applied for that. Yeah. Yes. So it was from the mayor. So it was a couple people from the startup scene here.
Is that a common thing in Sweden with like Swedish cities? Do they do the same thing in Gothenburg and Stockholm, for instance?
Yes, not. I'm like the most prominent one right now, I think, is Helsingborg. They're doing a lot of there. They have HBG Works, it's called. Stockholm has an initiative. There's an initiative called DIG on the national level. So it is happening, and it's happening all over. I think the UK was one of the first ones that really started doing that, but you see more and more of those initiatives. Yeah. So the GDS on the national level, not on the civil level, but on the national level, GDS, Gov UK's new site, that was one of the first ones, and that's where we got heavily inspired on how we are doing things as well. So yeah, and it's happening all over the world, a lot of different cities. San Diego, Toronto is really in the forefront of that. Boston, yeah. A little bit, yeah, on the national level. It's super interesting what they're doing there. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. But I think there's a little, I love what they're doing, but I think so right now we're calling it, there's one umbrella term, it's called GovTech. And I think there needs to be a distinction made between national level and local level, right? Because if on a national level, GDS in the UK and what Taiwan is doing, they're building a lot of tools, but then they're on a national level, so then it feeds into all the organizations, so it kind of makes sense. There is some scale there. But if Malmö Stad now takes the same on, then that doesn't add up. Yeah.
It's like when you pitch the idea of open sourcing things, how do people in the city react to that? Because I can imagine, like, if you have been dependent on custom-made software and like massive compartmentalization, like open sourcing everything might sound crazy to you.
Yes, I think that actually so far the city has been surprisingly open about it. So I think the case where they were a bit more negative about the open sourcing of it, I think it has less to do with the conceptual thing, but more of a fear of like not understanding what it means and what the consequence would be of open sourcing it. But now, I mean, this is the first time we're going to try it now with Helsingborg, and I think the interesting part of that is that a lot of the cities are working we have a lot of strategists, etc., in there, and then we're working with external companies. So a lot of times they are missing the people that can actually use the open source projects and run them for the city. So I think there's some change needed there. So we're like exploring here what we can do if we find cities that have the competences to adapt the services themselves and run them for them, or if we need to get more to a place kind of like the Ghost block, kind of where the system itself is open source, but then there might be like a non-profit organization that also gives you a hosted version of that, so you don't have to have the maintenance around.
So when you were supposed to do this matching process for the homeless people, at one point you needed to go back to the person who was originally asking you to do so and telling him, well, does not make any sense, like what you've been asking for us, but instead we propose this and that. Like, how did he react?
Very, very positive.
So he was like, no issue to kind of make him...
No, I think the thing is, since we basically, well, we use the data that we had in there, we could show off like the 68 days, as I mentioned before. We could show that it is very working well for him, and we had established some trust with them. But just by being able to be factual about it and not just saying like we think, but here is the proof around, that makes it made it really easy for him to also see. Of course, like this is the way we should move forward. I think that was my.
I mean, the matching meeting today on Wednesday takes about 3 hours. And then if we looked at all the other 68 days with 1,000 kroners a night per homeless a night, then we have on average 450 homeless each given night of the year. It's 500,000 saved on any part of that process. Either we could save 3 hours with a lot of work. It's a lot of work to build this out. We're working in a nice and objective, nice way. Or we could bike, and it would all of a sudden just make a couple of millions. So I think there it's very hard for them to argue in another way, right? So
just wonder, like, why he was actually thinking about this algorithm in the first place. Like, why would he?
I think it was hearing many complaints about the process not working well, and I think that was the first thing he grabbed onto. Like, maybe that's a way we can improve. Maybe that is the underlying problem. I think it comes from like. They knew that there was a problem, but they didn't know really what the problem is, and then jumped to a conclusion too early without going through a proper service design or user design.
It's very symptomatic for an organization who hasn't really clear goals. Like, what are they trying to achieve really? What he is trying to achieve, it's make it easier probably for the employees. The algorithm would make it less agitative in this meeting. That's basically what it would do. But the big thing here is that it's very symptomatic for the organization. They don't see the cost. They don't really understand it. It's not their money. It's not their, like, they don't really care about that. So I think that's also something when you go in there, you need to be clear about where is the money in your process and where can we actually do the bigger savings than just easing up for you. So yeah, I think that's the, yeah.
Since you implemented that new process, did you get an increase? And if yes, how is that handled internally? Because as you said, like, they don't see the cost and they don't see like what changing processes would actually change in the company. So if there is an increase, like, how do they handle it? And if there is not yet, like, do they plan to get an increase later?
Right. So right now, we only run, we are basically still waiting to get it into production. So in the trial runs, we basically copied the data from the system into the legacy system. So I think I cannot answer that question yet, but I think we'll be able to tell you that in a couple of weeks. But I think also that the interesting thing is, by making it simpler, then at least we're dealing with the real problem. So maybe when we get a lot of more error reports, at least we know we made it, like, we basically haven't lowered the number by obscurity, but this is the real number. Those are the real problems. And then maybe we need to change parameters. Maybe we need to say, we're not going to come out into the city if somebody reports a Coke can laying on the street. Maybe that's something that, I don't know, we should incentivize them to throw it away instead, or like that. So I think that's the next step.
There is I don't know what I'm allowed to say, but there is like a dark side of this where the entrepreneurs that we have deals with in the city, the people who go out actually changing the light bulbs and stuff, they have a certain budget and they are free to do whatever work they want for below 7,000 kroners or something. And clearly when we did user interviews, it showed that when work is low, like especially during winter, apparently fewer people report, then they go out and hunt themselves to get more work. Do you understand? So they go out and fill up more of the stuff that they need to do, just to get work, basically. So yeah, it's interesting.
It's scary to know.
Would you
say that in regards to open sourcing you say that there's a risk that other cities would consider this to be done? Like they would say, oh, Malmö already did this, we can pretty much just take it, put it into our own organization, and don't have like the knowledge to actually use it to the fullest of its potential. Like, I know you guys are working with Helsingborg right now. Let's say Gothenburg said, okay, you can just send us this and we will implement it into our organization. Would you say that there's a risk with them putting it into the organization without having the knowledge to use it?
I don't know. Maybe there is. We have to find it out. But I'm not so worried about that because I think we always think we are so unique in this space, right? And then in the end, every city is kind of doing the same thing over and over again. So I would be very, very surprised if it would be majorly different in Gothenburg or not. But yeah, we need to find it out.
So I'm gonna wrap it up. We're running out of time, but maybe Timo will stay a little bit, and if you wanted to chat with him or Mons, you can do that. But thank you all for stopping by, and we hope to see you at our future events. Make sure you're following us on Instagram, on Facebook, and that you are signed up to our newsletter, and we'll keep you updated on everything. And hope you come back to this lovely cafe as well. Awesome.